As we exit the month of May, which was Mental Health Awareness Month, we enter the month of June, otherwise known as Pride Month, dedicated to uplifting LGBTQ voices, celebrating their culture, and supporting their rights. Joining us now in the program to talk about the mental health of those in the LGBTQ community is Carrie Krawiec, a therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on the show. And as we talk about a group like those in the LGBTQ community, much like other marginalized groups, there's a number of different mental health effects and therefore other physiological health effects that come from that often come along with being from a marginalized group like this. So when we're talking about the LGBTQ community in particular, what are some of the common mental health ailments that do often come along with people in these particular groups, given where they're at in society, the way that society treats people in these communities, and some of the challenges that they face in day-to-day life?
Sure. So certainly people in the LGBTQ community are more likely to experience depression and anxiety, like you said, as a part of a result of either internalized experiences of isolation and self-esteem, uncertainty, whether or not they can be safe and safely themselves. And then also, like you said, related to minority stress in the sense the outside pressures that they cannot feel like they can be safely themselves and feel like there's threats to harm or hopelessness that they will be accepted and loved by either their close family or the community around them. And the recent census data really shows that those feelings are the highest among the youngest of the LGBTQ community. And although they maintain higher rates across the LGBTQ community instead of the straight community, they positively do get lower and lower as a person ages. So as a person becomes, feels more connected to their community, feels more pride in themselves, those feelings do tend to go down.
And that's what's so important about addressing these issues in these communities, because of course so many of them do stem from societal issues that then affect individuals and affect groups in the LGBTQ community. So from a mental health professional standpoint, where do you begin as a professional? Because for some, they're going to go to people that are in their community, that are professionals in this regard, who have a better perspective on some of the trials and the tribulations that they go through in day-to-day life. But for someone that maybe is not in one of those communities and is treating these people, how would you approach these sorts of issues that they're facing that are in some ways similar to what other people are facing, but are very much unique also in some ways to their community?
Sure. So I think, right, one of the ways in which therapists and social workers and psychologists are trained is to consider context. And so now you may not know every single detail of a person's context, but to know that context exists, that different generations have had different experiences, different people in different parts of the world have had different experiences, different people from different orientations have had different experiences. Knowing that the context exists is one way in which therapists can approach a situation, at least with curiosity and compassion, and just the understanding that context plays a role. So, I think what's interesting is if you ever talk to an LGBTQ adult, they have those awareness of their feelings from early childhood. And even before they experience bullying, ridicule, criticism, lack of acceptance, they do experience themselves as different because there may not be a close person in their family, or young children are experience really only their siblings and their parents and maybe some other children at school. They don't necessarily have a way to place their own context, right? They don't know. They think maybe perhaps I am the only person who feels this way, as opposed to one of many, 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 many millions. And that sense can create stress and anxiety across a lifetime, right? That I'm alone in this. We've talked about that with other mental health issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, something else. People feel very alone in their feelings. Nobody feels the way that I do. Part of talking to a therapist and reaching out to other people is to learn that there is a broader context, there is a shared experience, and you are not, in fact, alone.
And it's got to be tough, too, to be in these communities and see some progress being made over the course of the last decade or so in regards to uplifting people in the LGBTQIA plus community, but also seeing some of the regressions too, especially in recent years and even in our modern times throughout our society. And that balance has to be tough to cope with too. So for individuals that have LGBTQIA plus people in their lives, what can they do to help maybe shoulder some of the load that comes with some of these issues that we're seeing continuing to pop up, the rhetoric that is out there that is often targeting people in the LGBTQIA plus community?
I think you're absolutely right. And perhaps that's part of the explanation why people in the older age populations, although they may identify in that community, do not experience the same degree of depression or anxiety as younger people, is that they have in fact lived a lifetime where they have seen the context change, where they've experienced the benefits of progress and maybe even been involved in the benefits of progress. And that in itself may help be a protective feature, right, to resilience and recovery, and those kinds of things. I think perhaps also younger people, teenagers, young adults are at heightened risk for depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and the starts of those things to begin. And again, don't necessarily know to feel like, right, this is something we can overcome, that we can do hard things, and that other people have done hard things before us and will continue. So I think really just staying informed, learning from generations before you, just meeting with other people, getting to know them and talking about their experiences and what they've encountered can help offer resiliency to even the younger populations.
And as you mentioned, the disparities in some of these feelings, particularly of depression and anxiety among different age groups in the LGBTQIA plus community, there is some staggering data on that. In fact, from the U.S. Census Bureau's Household Pulse Survey from 2021 to 2022 that shows the level of depression by percentage in LGBTQ communities in age groups 18 to 29 is significantly higher, 53.6% than those in non-LGBT communities, where it stands at 30%. And that trend is really staggering across all age groups, but it's particularly high in those in younger age groups. Beyond the societal elements of this, what makes those in younger populations in the LGBTQIA plus community so much more susceptible, particularly to depression, but also to anxiety, where that same level, 60.8% of those surveyed by the U.S. Census Bureau said they do have feelings of anxiety in 18 to 29-year-old age groups?
Sure, I think perhaps there's probably multiple explanations, but some that are coming to mind. If you're still in school age, perhaps high school, leaving high school, maybe starting college or even starting the workforce, your life may feel out of control for many reasons. And then when you add this dimension to it, like you're out of control of perhaps knowing or not knowing, like I said, who you can safely turn to. You're out of control if you're, like I said, still in school, high school situation. You're out of control of who you're sort of subjected to every day. So then they report higher instances of bullying, higher instances of criticism, a sense that they're not accepted, and that you really can't choose your environment. That once you're later on into your adulthood, you can make choices to pick workplaces or leave workplaces or enter into certain things where you have a little bit of your own volition, where the younger population doesn't. Again, like we've talked about too, just using social media and stuff, again, fostering this idea that somehow people are different and misunderstood and not as well liked for perhaps as someone else can affect someone's self-esteem. And right, those things would just be magnified if you were also carrying the stress. I think also the stress of a secret, if you're not yet out, you're carrying the pressure that perhaps you're deceiving people, and at some point they are going to confront you or discover your truth. And that feels also like a burden.
And this is a time of the year too, during Pride Month, where there is so much support within the LGBTQIA plus community for others that are either out or still not out in that community. But also it's a time where that support maybe encourages people that have not been out to come out. And that can cause some issues too in families that maybe have individuals that don't understand what it is like to have this part of your identity that is so strong, that is so central to who you are and how you feel in our world maybe be changing from what it has been during the course of that relationship. So for families in particular, and for friends as well, for really anybody, if someone is coming out, what suggestions do you have for those people in terms of both being encouraging, but at the very least being respectful of someone taking what is a significant step in their life and making really a move in their life, a decision in their life that puts them in a very vulnerable spot, living their truth, living their true identity?
I love the way you said that, because I think, of course, in a family, upon hearing information, right, like you said, there could be so much gratitude. Here, you've trusted me with something deeply personal. You're looking to me for my acceptance and affirmation. Like, parents and families and siblings in many ways should be honored and thrilled that they're that given this moment of, like you said, like intimacy and vulnerability, and to convey that also with respect and encouragement. On the flip side, right, for some people to just even be to allow for the compassion of their other family members, that they're getting information that perhaps might cause them some fear, not even if they're trying to be judgmental, but that they also would fear for their child or their sibling if they thought they were going to be mistreated in their community, if they just don't have a cultural norm or a connection to a community to be able to just feel safe themselves, that there's also a degree of coping and processing that would have to happen for those people. And, of course, our perfect situation would be this perfect moment, but to share together that a whole range of emotions would, of course, be acceptable and allowed, and can they be had without causing hurt or harm.
We're joined by Carrie Krawiec on today's edition of the Megacast, the therapist at the Birmingham Maple Clinic. You can get in contact with Carrie and all of the professionals at the Birmingham Maple Clinic at birminghammaple.com. Today we're talking about Pride Month, and in particular helping those in the LGBTQIA plus community as they navigate still a treacherous world today. Maybe is not as treacherous as it's been in the past, but to say that it's not still a difficult world for these individuals to live in and be accepted in just simply for being who they are would be a discount to their life experiences. So really important that we're talking about this today. And as we talk about the mental health issues that can arise as a part of the anxiety and the often vitriol that comes toward this community from rhetoric all across the board, certainly in the media, being a supportive person in people's lives in marginalized communities can be really important in maintaining their mental health and preventing some of the more severe cases of depression or anxiety. You can be that rock in their life that they go to for support in a world where often they do tend to sometimes feel closed off, especially if they're not out. So can you give us some advice, Carrie, for those that may want to be that support system or continue to be that support system for someone in the LGBTQIA plus community? The difference between being an active listener and a support system versus maybe being intruding or providing unsolicited advice in a space that maybe you're not even familiar with yourself.
I mean, I think, yeah, that's like probably the most important thing you said right there, is just being self-aware of your own limitations and doing your own work to inform yourself, and, what kind of education or, information is available to you, and just being open to receiving it, I'm sure is certainly an important feature of any kind of growth. I think that, like you said too, I mean, there is exposure to information that is hurtful and damaging, but we probably don't realize we have as much choice as we do in what we're exposed to. That if you're encountering fearful or frightful news articles, that perhaps it's okay to modify your use, to certainly, like I said, stay informed and to stay safe, but that if what you're experiencing is routinely upsetting to you, perhaps limiting your exposure to those kinds of pieces of information, and diving in. I think just getting involved in other organizations and other community groups, or, online. There's the Trevor Project, there's glsen.org. There are ways in which to feel like a community of giving supportive information to help offset what we hear in the news, which may be intentionally amplified to cause distress and panic.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the basic principles of talking with anybody about topics that may put them in a vulnerable position. Either they're being vulnerable in a sense, and when I say vulnerable, I mean in the sense of they're opening up to you about issues they're having in their life. They're opening up to you about their identity. They're opening up to you about their feelings. All of those put people in vulnerable positions and require a certain level of sensitivity. And so no matter what you're going into here, or no matter what you're discussing with somebody in your life, I think these principles, Carrie, can really be an important part of being a support system and what it means to be that support system, that rock for someone in your life. That active listening is super important. Validating people's feelings without necessarily bringing your opinions into it or even your own life experiences into it if it's not asked. Those are all part of simply hearing somebody out, because often for individuals, especially in marginalized communities, from my experience speaking with people in my life from those perspectives, is it often can seem like there is a lot of noise out there, and in some cases it is often just noise, but they're looking for a place to voice something that's been eating at their mind. So how does that all play into just really talking to anybody about their mental health, and what can we learn from these experiences that the LGBTQIA plus community has had in speaking about their mental health?
Sure, like you said, I mean, right, intimacy comes from taking a risk. You take a risk and you reveal something about yourself, whatever it is, if it's part of your sexual identity, if it's part of your history, if it's something you've encountered in your lifetime, if it's a dream or hope for your future. When you share that with someone else, you take a risk. You take a risk that they'll minimize it. You take a risk that they'll counteract it or try to beat it with something of their own, or that they'll judge you. And right, and then when a person does not do those things, then they make you feel safe, heard, and accepted, and maybe share something deeply personal about themselves in a generous way. Then the reward, right, is that you feel closer to that person. And so when in any form of a relationship, whether it's a therapeutic relationship, a romantic relationship, a parent-child relationship, or friendship, that dynamic continues to exist, right? Is that we take a sort of a small toss of something personal of ourselves to someone else, and our hope is that they catch it safely and then toss us something back, and we get that rhythm going with deeper and deeper information. And I think so, just recognizing that, also recognizing it doesn't have to be perfect. There are fumbles along the way. Sometimes we do say the wrong thing, or make the wrong, I don't know, eyebrow raise. Some of these things are, they happen very instinctively and outside of our control, right? But to be able to then take ownership for them and correct, say, hey, I noticed I made myself, like, I said something judgmental and that wasn't my intention to be hurtful, but now I'm willing to talk or think more about what I said and how that impacted you. And you just go back and forth, like I said, with these like sort of gentle tosses, almost like tossing an egg, right? You want to catch it gently and then toss it back gently. And as you get deeper and deeper with information, you feel safer and safer to do that.
Well, Carrie, we appreciate you joining us to give us some insight on talking to individuals from marginalized communities, especially as we begin Pride Month in June, and try to provide as much support as we possibly can to our friends, our family, and our loved ones in the LGBTQIA plus community. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.